Welcome. This is Gutted. Loaves, fishes, and being more than the sum of your parts. I'm Dr. Stacy Marquis, and today we continue our exploration of The Chosen with Scene 9 of Season 2, Episode 5. The title? Spirit. The camera shifts from the rigid structure of the Sanhedrin back to the shore of the Jordan River. Z walks beside Jesus and, for the first time, gives voice to the question that's been sitting in his throat. Why me? Why my brother? Underneath those questions is an assumption. There must have been a specific reason Jesse was chosen. Because in Z's world, nothing meaningful happens without intention. Everything is strategic. People are chosen for a reason. Outcomes are tied to purpose, and nothing significant is ever random. But Jesus dismantles that entire framework in a single sentence. The man suffered for 38 years. That's a long time. Not your brother suffered for 38 years, not Jesse suffered for 38 years. A human being suffered for 38 years. That's a long time. Jesus didn't choose Jesse because of status, usefulness, or potential. He chose him because he mattered. Period. And while Jesse's healing had nothing to do with hierarchy, it did have an effect. It got Z's attention. And in that moment, something shifts. Z realizes he didn't just witness the outpouring of a miracle. He himself was actively being drawn in by the one who performed it. He was being pursued by the Messiah. Up to this point, Z's entire adult life has been built around mission, discipline, control, and obedience. So when Jesus tells him that not only was he trying to get his attention, but that he also recognizes the order trained him to be fearless, Z responds with the familiar and well-practiced Zealot mantra, "No Lord but God, to the death." When something challenges the way we understand the world, we default to what we know. We reach for the version of ourselves that keeps us grounded. And for Z, in this moment, that version is the one he has spent years perfecting by being disciplined, loyal, and ready for a mission. Jesus tells Z he's perfectly aware of the trouble he caused by healing Jesse, and he's not done. There will be more. More disruption, more tension, and more opposition. For Z, that's essentially a battle cry. He's like, yes, let's do this. He walks a few steps ahead of Jesus, then turns to face him, confirming what he already knows. You are the Messiah, aren't you? Jesus answers with one word, yes. And that's all Z needs. He drops to one knee, immediately pledging his allegiance. Jesus just needs to tell him what to do, and he will make it happen. Because in his mind, clarity leads to action. He's waiting for an assignment, a mission. But Jesus doesn't leverage the skill set Z has spent decades refining. Instead, he shifts the focus entirely away from action toward understanding. As he tells Z, he wants him to understand the nature of his mission. Trained to obey, Z nods, saying yes. Then, after a moment of silence, asks, "How?" As Jesus starts to point out how easily people lose focus, Z, in a hurry to prove his worth, interrupts, saying he doesn't have a focus problem. Right. He has trained for this exact moment for almost 25 years. Whatever Jesus wants, he will make it happen. Now. Jesus just sighs. We'll see. Then he asks for Z's dagger, which he hands over without hesitation. This dagger isn't just a weapon. It's Z's identity, his proof of training, proof of belonging, proof that his life has meant something. Jesus turns it over in his hands, commenting on the impressive craftsmanship. Then, without any warning or explanation, he throws it into the river. Z just stands there, stunned, looking at Jesus. Smiling slightly, Jesus says, "Didn't see that coming." Because sometimes the only way to shift someone out of what they're certain about is to take away the thing they're using to stay certain. You might expect Z to be angry. I mean, he worked really hard for that dagger. But instead, his response is one of confusion. "You have no use for that?" Jesus doesn't answer. He tells him that he has a better sword. That what needs to happen is Z needs to be patient. He needs to rest. He's had one heck of a week. But Z, still clinging to his identity, asks, "Then why do you need someone like me?" Because if you take away the skill, the question becomes what or who is left. Jesus doesn't rebuild Z's identity around a different skill. He doesn't replace the dagger with something else. He tells him that he has all he needs. And then, placing his hand over Z's heart, says, what he wanted was him. And Z doesn't know what to do with that, because being wanted without function is unfamiliar. There's no training or script for that. So he asks again, why? And Jesus answers, because he's not alone in misunderstanding, which is both comforting and incredibly frustrating, because what Z wants is clarity, a role, a definition, a function. But what Jesus gives him is something he will have to grow into. For now, being wanted will have to be enough. Which is a difficult thing to hear because it requires letting go of the belief that you are defined by what you do as opposed to who you are. Jesus tells him no one earns a place in their group because of a special skill. Z, worried and trained to look for danger, shifts his focus, saying, if Jesus continues like this, there will be opposition, maybe even from his former order. Jesus just looks at him. What are you going to do? Stop them? And Z answers honestly, I might have if you hadn't just thrown my Sika dagger in the river. And they both laugh, because humor creates space for you to breathe. It helps keep you in the moment. Jesus doesn't resolve the tension. He simply says, if that day comes, we'll find out. With that, Jesus places his arm around Z's shoulder and they head back toward the camp. As the camera returns to the water, we see Atticus retrieving the dagger from the river. Turning it in his hands, he watches them walk away. And maybe that's where this scene reflects our lives, because most of us, if we're honest, believe we matter because of what we do, what we produce, what we fix, what we carry, what we contribute. We learn it early. Be helpful, be capable, be the one people can rely on. Because usefulness creates belonging. It gives us a place in the system. But what happens when that system shifts? When the roles change, the need disappears, or the very thing you built your identity around gets taken from you? Who are you then? Because that's the moment Z is standing in. Not just losing a weapon, but losing the framework that told him who he was. And if we're honest, we've all had that moment. When the job changes, when the relationship ends, when the kids grow up, when the role you played for years is no longer needed, and suddenly you're left asking the same question. If I'm not what I do, then what's left? It's a hard question. Being valued for who you are instead of what you bring can feel less secure at first, because you can't control it the same way. You can't earn it. You can't prove it. You can't reinforce it through performance. You have to receive it. And that's a very different kind of strength. So maybe the question isn't, what are you capable of? But something quieter and a little harder to answer. Who are you when there's nothing left to prove? This is Gutted. Loaves, fishes, and being more than the sum of your parts.